Patrick Mahomes is the best quarterback in the NFL, but that has not translated to fantasy success as of late. We will discuss if he will bounce back this season, but also head on the other top storylines for the Kansas City Chiefs entering 2025 on today's episode of Locked On Fantasy Football.
You are Locked On Fantasy, your daily NFL fantasy podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome into the Locked On Fantasy Football Podcast. I'm one of your co-hosts, Michelle Magdziuk, and when I'm not doing this, I'm a researcher and fantasy analyst with NFL Network.
And I'm your other co-host, Vinnie Iyer. When I'm not doing this, I'm writing about NFL fantasy and betting for sportingnews.com.
Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, new customers can get $200 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. Today, we are going to dig into the top three storylines for the Kansas City Chiefs entering the season. It's always going to start with Patrick Mahomes and what he's going to, the numbers he's going to put up in any given year. We've seen monster seasons from him, but the last 2 years have been a disappointment in terms of his fantasy points. But his ranking is really not going down. He's still a pricey quarterback in drafts this year. And then we have to figure out who's going to be the top pass catcher in Kansas City. It's been Travis Kelce for so long, but it does seem like maybe he's finally hit that age limit where it's falling off for him. And the wide receivers are starting to look like a really nice room there with Rashee Rice and Xavier Worthy and Hollywood Brown. So we'll discuss that. And then, of course, hit their backfield. And it might be one to avoid just overall among this whole entire group for fantasy drafts this year. So all things we will discuss today. Let's start with Patrick Mahomes. And my question is he the most overrated fantasy quarterback? Because he's sitting at quarterback 6 in consensus rankings behind only Josh Allen, Lamar Jackson, Jaden Daniels, Jalen Hurts, and Joe Burrow. But last year, he was the quarterback 12 overall. Quarterback 11 in average scoring. The year prior, he was a quarterback 14 in average scoring. Now, we know what he did the rest of his career prior to that. He was consistently a top 3 quarterback. But the last 2 years, it's hard to say that he deserves to be the 6th quarterback off the board this year.
Yeah, and the biggest thing that we've been fighting through is the fact that he's not had the reliable weapons. We've had a lot of injuries as well and things that have knocked people out. And also the Chiefs have been winning a lot of ugly games with their defense, and they just haven't been as explosive as an offense. Teams have been focused on taking away the big play, making the Chiefs sustain longer drives. They've also not been great in the red zone where they relied a lot on Harrison Butker and field goals. So this is a team that, again, sometimes is too good where they don't need to be in shootouts and throw the ball a ton. But I think this year it might signal a change back to what we've seen in Patrick Mahomes. And now I'm not saying you're going to get a good value with him, right? QB6, there's no value to be had there because he could actually end up as the QB6. So there's nothing to say he's a steal, unfortunately. What you need to hope is that some people also think this way and say, hey, he's overrated. Why do I want to take him at this spot? But when I look at the upside with Xavier Worthy and Rashee Rice, it's kind of you have to put the puzzle together. With Rashee Rice, you saw the clicking going on. Then he was not available. So you didn't see him with Xavier Worthy. Then you saw Xavier Worthy come on strong. You also didn't really see Marquise Hollywood Brown in the mix of this offense the way we thought as well. So you haven't seen these 3 guys. They're all speed guys. Rashee Rice is more of the big slot that you would look at in the Juju Smith-Schuster mold, who's been productive there. But we know Worthy and Rice can stretch the field, and we know Patrick Mahomes has a big arm. Now, I'm thinking the Super Bowl just might be a hint of some things to come where I think there's going to be more pressure on this passing game and offense in general to come through for this team. I'm not saying that this defense is going to totally fall apart. They still have a lot of key pieces, including Chris Jones, Trent McDuffie, George Karlaftis, a lot of linebackers who can cover as well. But I don't think the Chiefs would qualify as a dominant defense. I think they had that kind of role just a couple of years ago. I don't think they're a dominant force, especially with the schedule. When you look at teams they're playing, there's a lot of weak defensive teams, or there's teams that could provide a shootout, right, where they cross over and get the Commanders. Or you look at another matchup with the Eagles, and then you have some matchups you think they could handle pretty well, like the Cowboys or Giants and those type of games where And then you look at just overall, I think there's multiple opportunities where they're either having good matchups or they're going to have to put up a lot of points to win those games. Either way, that's a good news for Mahomes. And I think the other thing you factor in, we can't trust this running game all that much. I think the offensive line should be better with the move they made for Jalen Moore. I think he could actually emerge well as a 49ers backup to be their strong starting tackle here. So I think there's a lot of things that say they want to be a downfield passing offense. They've told you that with Worthy and Brown. They want that element back that they had with Tyreek Hill. They might do it by committee a little bit with Worthy and Brown, but that's what they want. And they also have that element they've had in recent years with Juju with Rashee Rice, and they also have some opportunity here to the upside. So I do think Mahomes could finish this high. You're just not going to get a good value, and that's where I struggle with a little bit. It's like he should be knocked down to make him a good value, but unfortunately, he's still inflated with his value overall.
Yeah, and it's just hard because even in that Super Bowl game where his numbers at the end of the game end up looking high, right? Because they were getting absolutely demolished. So they had to pass a ton. Quarters 1 through 3, Mahomes only had 148 passing yards and 1 touchdown. So it's not like he was doing anything for fantasy, even though they were down that entire game. It took until just absolute garbage time for him to put up numbers. There's not going to, even if the Chiefs defense isn't as good as last year, they're not going to be in garbage time often, right? With Patrick Mahomes and Andy Reid in the regular season, they're almost always going to be, even if the games are closer, they're not going to be getting demolished where he has to throw a bunch at the end of the game like that. So yeah, it's not like Mahomes is just not the value I'm looking for. Like, could he get back to quarterback 2, quarterback 3? Sure, he's Patrick Mahomes and he could have a monster season in any given season. But the last 2 years, he has scored 15 or fewer points in 15 of 32 games. So nearly 50% of his games, he's scoring 15 or fewer fantasy points. I mean, that's just not helping you win games whatsoever at the quarterback position. He scored 17 or fewer points in 21 of 32 games, 66%. And he's only had one game with 30 plus points over the last 2 years. And that was in week 7, 2023. So it's not even like, okay, you have to take, some of the bad games because he puts up monster games other weeks that win you your matchups. That's just not happening. He's not giving you those monster games and he's giving you too many bad ones. So, if Mahomes ends up having one of his seasons like he had in 2018 or 2022, maybe I'll just have to miss out on it. But there's just no way I'm taking him at quarterback 6 when there's too many other guys going behind him that I think will outproduce him, and then obviously are better values and lower costs. So it would make no sense to reach on Mahomes.
Yeah, I think the difference is between those guys that are going ahead, and that's the same guys in some order: Lamar Jackson, Josh Allen, Jane Daniels, Jalen Hurts, and Joe Burrow. I think they all have higher floors than Patrick Mahomes, which is very weird to say, but it's true. I think Mahomes definitely, when he's on, he has the highest ceiling of any pocket passing quarterback in this league. Could he easily just kind of displace Baker Mayfield and be in that same spot? Absolutely, he could with the weapons he has and all that. But are you going to get a good value? No, you're not, because again, his value is inflated already here. So I think those guys are a little bit safer. I think you have to say there's some volatility and there's a little tier drop off here, right? Where I think there is like a mini tier between Josh Allen, Lamar Jackson, and Jaden Daniels, but Hurts and Burrow are kind of an extension of that. I don't consider Mahomes an extension of that, right? He's good when on to put up big fantasy numbers, but again, the Chiefs, we've seen this too with Tom Brady, right? He had some years where he was putting up some big fantasy numbers, then he had to reel it back, then he had to get his weapons back in order. So that definitely could happen here. Again, let's see. If he drops to like QB 8, 9, or 10, somewhere there, then you might get some value. But at this very current moment, you can't go in that direction. But I do like him. I don't think it's a terrible pick. I just think I would rather wait on a quarterback.
And it does look like he's going to be playing with some of the best wide receiver group he's had since the team traded away Tyreek Hill. So we have to figure out who's worthy of their draft costs, who's going too low, who's going too high. Rashee Rice at wide receiver 19 coming off that knee injury. He was looking real hot to start the year last year. We will get into the top pass catchers in Kansas City right after we hear from one of our sponsors.
All right, this episode, Locked On Fantasy Football, is brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook. Now, we are getting a Game 7 to decide the NBA playoffs in the finals here. The Pacers have pushed it to the limit with a win at home at the Gainbridge Fieldhouse. So we're going to have Game 7 in Oklahoma City, going back with Shea Gilgeous-Alexander, Tyrese Halliburton, dueling one last time. Right now, the Thunder, 7.5-point favorites. This series has been all over the place, some blowouts, some close games, some comebacks, all that. So you can get in on the action. And we've seen it every night with the NBA playoffs, highlight-worthy performances, major momentum shifts, can't miss moments. There's one more game of all that coming here. So check it out. Whether it's a game-winning shot or breakout player like we've seen in these playoffs, there's never been a better time to get in the action. This is the last chance you'll get for an NBA game for a while. And then you can transition, of course, to all the great stuff that you can put on with MLB. FanDuel makes it so easy to stay in the game before tip-off, live, whatever you're looking at. Player props, performance trends, same-game parlays. Fans have more ways than ever to play smart and win big. New to FanDuel, that's the perfect time to sign up because you can head to FanDuel.com, place your first $5 bet. If it wins, you would get $200 in bonus bets right there. Make every moment more with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. All right, Michelle, let's look at the wide receivers here. Rashee Rice, right now ranked wide receiver 19, coming off the injury. Only 4 games last year, was on fire, as Michelle mentioned early. And he was wide receiver 16, so 3 spots ahead of that in points per game early in the season. And then he had Xavier, who took a while to get going. He exploded in the Super Bowl, but in the regular season, only wide receiver 45 on average. He's at 27. So, Michelle, of these two, who you're looking at as a better value at this moment?
Yeah, Rashee Rice is very, very interesting because, if you look at the overall scoring, wide receiver 16, but he played 4 snaps in that 4th game he played. So, and that counts against his average scoring. From weeks 1 through 3, prior to tearing his LCL in his knee, he was a wide receiver 4 in total fantasy points. But it's such a tiny sample size that's a little bit worrisome. However, I'll say, so like those first 3 weeks were fantastic for him. Over 100 yards in 2 of the 3 games. The other game, 75 yards and a touchdown. And he was getting a ton of targets. That week 3 had 14 targets in that game. The other game's 9 and 6. He was heavily used. And I think I'm okay with trusting that small sample size because of what we saw, how we saw him getting used at the end of his rookie season. When from weeks 12 through 17, he didn't play in week 18 of his rookie season. These were his targets: 10, 9, 10, 9, 12, 6. And his yards were great too. So he was being utilized in this role already. And then that's how they kept utilizing him, but even in better scenarios early last year. So I do think Rice at wide receiver 19, and it's a little risky coming off the injury. I do think he can be a very good value still, even though he's going pretty high.
Yeah, I think actually both Rice and Worthy could be very nice values here. And it could just mean Patrick Mahomes is going to come through with those numbers. But regardless of Mahomes finishing as high, you got to look at this situation to say there's 106 vacated targets. I know you have Hollywood Brown, who's injured on the shelf, and he's going to cut into that, but Rice will too. So we know there's plenty to go around. And Worthy got going at the end of the last season. If you look at it, 3 of his final games, he had more than 16 fantasy points there, and he didn't play of note here in week 18. So when you look at that, I mean, and then you carry over into the Super Bowl where he just absolutely could not be covered by the Eagles. I know it was garbage time and they were trailing and all that, but he was still doing it. He was still live and making some big plays and making it somewhat a situation to sweat for the Eagles late because of all his big plays. Like they just could not cover him and hold on to his speed. So I think Worthy, to me, is the better value because, again, he's a wide receiver 27. I do like both of these, but I just say the guy that's a little bit lower is the one I'm going to go after because, again, we've seen Xavier Worthy's upside. Now, with this position, I think I'm more willing, because this is a wide receiver 2-3 borderline that I'm going for, right, to swing for the fences and go for ceiling more than floor. And I think Rice does have a pretty good floor because he's going to be that big slot, that Juju role that we've seen being pretty key to this offense and just see the key volume of targets. So what I could see is Xavier Worthy might have more touchdowns and more big plays, average more yards per catch. That could help him create the yardage gap. And then you have a Rice might be the higher volume guy, right? In half point, full point PPR, you might try to lean toward Rice. But again, Hollywood Brown, we'll see, right? I mean, we have to see him sustain and stay healthy in a Chiefs uniform. But I think he's a valuable number 3 because you have to respect his speed. And then in an interesting twist, I think Rice and Worthy will help each other because they're both on the field together. And you're going to have to account for coverage, right? You got to use some size on the inside to take care of Rice. You got to worry about the intermediate routes, but you also have to worry about the deep ball on the other side with Brown. So I think there's going to be some favorable coverage opportunities. And then don't forget, Travis Kelce is still Travis Kelce. Some teams are going to look at it that way. So I think you're going to have some very favorable coverage downfield for both of these young receivers. And it's very diversified, I think, between Kelce, Hollywood Brown, Worthy, and Rice. So I do love this in terms of this mix of receivers. I think it's the best mix they've really had since, say, Hill was playing with Kelce.
Yeah, and I really do just think Rice is going to be the lead receiver on this team. From weeks 1 through 3, Rice had 29 targets. The next closest player on the Chiefs was Travis Kelce at 12. Again, Rice had 29 targets and Kelce had 12, and he was the second most targeted guy on this team through the first 3 weeks. I think Patrick Mahomes trusts Rice. I think he's his go-to guy. And when you're looking at the rankings, I'm fine with the guys, that he's going just over. DJ Moore, Marvin Harrison Jr., Cortland Sutton, DK Metcalf, Zay Flowers are all going right behind him. And I think Rice, there's a strong argument to say Rice should be at the top of that group.
Yeah, I think I do like him in relation to those, but I do like Worthy better a little bit later. I'm going to say this because, again, he has that big play upside. I know what he can do. I mean,
Yeah.
I don't know if this is like the equivalent of getting into Gabe Davis after the Bills run and he had a big game, but it could be. No, I really see a lot of talent in Worthy. I mean, Worthy is a first rounder, so let's not forget that. They invested a pick. They made that trade with the Bills to get him. And I think this is an indication, again, they know if they stretch the field a little bit better, everything becomes easier. The running game's easier. Throwing to Kelce becomes easier. Throwing to Rice becomes easier. So I think they know this, and they've just had that element missing. It's not like they haven't tried, right? They tried Sky Moore, got in Kadarius Toney. They've tried with these other guys. It just has not worked out. But I think they have the mix finally they want, with Brown giving you a little experience. Rice essentially is going into kind of his year 2 at this point with the first year wiped out, and so is Worthy. So I do like this array of weapons. That said, that's probably going to mean Travis Kelce kind of tapers off and stays where he's at. I mean, right now he's ranked tight end 7. He was tight end 8 on average last year. So that might be this value for value where he should be going based on the evolving look of the Chiefs' receiving core and the fact that his age is rather advanced at this point.
Yeah, it does seem like he just hit that cliff last year with age, because it's not like his targets went down. It's his yards per reception that went so far down, and his touchdowns. Now, could touchdowns increase for him? Yes. Touchdowns are a volatile stat. They can go up and down. Kelce could definitely be saved for the red zone area. And if the whole offense is scoring more because the weapons, then Kelce could, that's where Kelce can come through with value. If he gets 8 to 10 touchdowns, I just don't think the receiving yards are going to get there again, because he was averaging 8.3 targets per game last season. It was 8.1 in the season prior, 8.9 in the season prior to that. That's when he was tight end 2, tight end 1, tight end 1. Like every year, he had 133 targets on the season. That was third most among tight ends last year. So it had nothing to do with his usage. He was actually getting used plenty. I think he just hit that age cliff, and he's not going to be able to do the same things that we're used to. Only one tight end has ever recorded more than 600 receiving yards in their age 36 or older season. That was Tony Gonzalez. He did it twice. And it's not, 930 yards, 859, which are good. And then also touchdowns, just guys that are, trying to read the stat right now. Gonzalez and Antonio Gates are the only tight ends with 5+ receiving touchdowns in their age 36 or older season. So historically, it just does not happen. So I'm okay with letting Travis Kelce fall deeper in boards and not being like, oh, well, he's a good value now, and I got to take him because he's Travis Kelce. I'm going to let someone else take Kelce and start him and be disappointed every week, most weeks.
Yeah. Value, I think, really is not just, hey, am I going to steal him at the spot? But value is also, am I just getting what I'm picking and that's all I'm going to get, right? Because that's not fun either. Like, if you know exactly what you're going to get, like my goal with every pick is to get massive upside and outscore and outperform their draft rank. And I don't think you're going to get that necessarily with Kelce. I actually feel like Kelce is more likely to stay where he's at in the rankings than Mahomes. Mahomes, I think, has several scenarios where he can shoot up from that QB6 spot. But I think Kelce, I mean, we've talked about all the other great younger tight ends, Trey McBride, Sam Laporta, George Kittle is coming off a big year. Mark Andrews should rebound as a veteran as well in his situation. I think him and Kittle have better situations right now for their usage and continued growth here with their fantasy status, where I don't think you're going to see that necessarily with Kelce. So there's just too many guys that you can take. Brock Bowers, I didn't even mention him as a rising star that we know can smash it as a tight end one. So again, there's just not going to be much value over those guys. Like I can see clearly that all those guys could outscore Kelce, but I do not see that necessarily with Mahomes, where Mahomes easily could finish as the QB1 if he gets to that magical 45 to 50 touchdowns, then it's out there. But I don't see Kelce being like that 1,000 to 1,200 yard, 12 TD guy. I just don't see it this season.
Neither do I. Now, the Chiefs backfield, it's getting crowded, right? Last year it was Isaiah Pacheco going into the season. We felt good that he would get a big workload, and he was going high in drafts. It did not end up working out. Injury-riddled season. Ended up being the running back 44 on average last year, going as a running back 26 now. But he's going to have competition with Kareem Hunt and Elijah Mitchell if he can stay healthy. So we will discuss this Chiefs backfield to end today's show right after a quick break. I want to thank you all for making Locked On Fantasy Football your first listen today. For your second listen, check out the Locked On NFL Scouting. The NFL draft is over, but the roster moves and news never stop. Host Kyle Krabs and Joe Marino will make you the most informed NFL fan this offseason. Find Locked On NFL Scouting on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts. All right, let's talk about this Chiefs backfield to close up today's show. Isaiah Pacheco sitting at running back 26. Bad season for him last year, running back 44 in average scoring. Kareem Hunt, running back 60 in consensus rankings right now. He was the running back 25 in average scoring last season. And then you have Elijah Mitchell, who they signed this year in free agency, running back 69. He has not stayed healthy in years, so it's hard to even say he could do anything. But if he does stay healthy, he is a very good running back, and he could take some snaps and touches away from these top two guys in Pacheco and Hunt. With Isaiah Pacheco, we saw in 2023 he was a running back 15 on average. So we've seen some success from him in fantasy. However, he's never had a game with more than 20 carries in his career, and only 4 games in his career with more than 16 carries. So I really, really not interested in this backfield at all, because if it was just Kareem Hunt, then fine, maybe. Or if it was just Isaiah Pacheco, maybe at running back 26 cost. But I don't think any of these guys are going to get consistent enough touches or production to want to draft them or start them.
Yeah, I really thought the Chiefs might be in the market of drafting a running back or just looking at a potential upgrade. Pacheco's really outdone himself as a 7th-round pick. I don't think there's much more he can do. And this is why 7th-round picks are risky, or later-round picks. We even see it with the guy they added, Elijah Mitchell. He was okay early for the 49ers, but Mitchell was slight, and he had a 5th-round pick status, and he also got hurt. So the Chiefs are trying to just piecemeal together a backfield and really not trying to worry too much about this. And this also may be an indication that they're okay being like a very pass-heavy team this year and going in that direction with some of the moves that they've made and just the makeup of their roster right now. So I look at the Chiefs, and again, this is just weird to have so limited options here because Pacheco wasn't healthy. Hunt is up there at age, and he was just a kind of super sub fill-in. I wouldn't even call it super. It was just a sub fill-in and did okay. And then you have Mitchell, again, a backup from the 49ers who was breaking down a bit. So I'm really surprised, Michelle, they didn't go after Nick Chubb, who was hanging out there for a long time until the Texans added him with Joe Mixon, and then J.K. Dobbins as well, who was sitting out there and went to Denver. So it's kind of interesting that they could have added an option, a veteran option, somebody, right, to take pressure off this. I don't know if that's saying, okay, they have faith in Pacheco Hunt combination. I just don't think, like, again, they're okay with what they're getting from this group. And maybe, again, this is a transition to going back to being more riding Mahomes this year with their weapons. So it's interesting. But again, I just don't see any interest. I don't see much upside. I only see more downside with the durability issues with these guys.
Yeah, I just don't see any upside. I mean, even if he he gets back to his great 2023 season, like his top career one, that's running back 15, and it was not helping you win many games. It really wasn't. It was just kind of average production there. There's so many players going after him that at least have a much higher ceiling, and it's a lot of the rookies with RJ Harvey and Quinshon Judkins and Caleb Johnson, or even a Najee Harris in his similar situation to Pacheco, where it's kind of crowded. But I still think Harris will get more work. And then you have Travis Etienne, who's so far down. And you're talking about, Etienne had a bad year just like Pacheco, but Etienne has had a top 5 season in fantasy. We've seen the elite parts of him, and he's still, it seems to me, the clear back in Jacksonville. So just way too many guys I like more than Isaiah Pacheco. So he is going to be off my list, but that doesn't mean I want to take Kareem Hunt later. That doesn't mean I want to take, a huge shot at Elijah Mitchell. I'm just pretty much staying away from this backfield altogether.
Yeah, and it's not like or beyond Andy Reid to just make this a situational committee. It really could happen, and he just hasn't been able to hit the way that we saw early in his Chiefs time with Jamal Charles and turning him into what he was late in his career with his receiving ability, and then early in days of Kareem Hunt when he was the NFL rushing yards leader. Like we haven't seen that running game take off. It's kind of interesting because they've had some good interior blockers, including Creed Humphrey and Trey Smith, but it just is not kind of materialized to be as effective as we thought it could be in the running game. They took even a first-round pick on Clyde Edwards-Helaire. That didn't work out. So I don't know. It feels like the Chiefs are not that concerned. I think they're okay with getting the complementary work and situational work from their backfield. I don't think they necessarily want to ride a workhorse. Again, if they wanted someone to compete, they would have got someone other than Mitchell, right, who's been a backup and has had his own injury issues, because we know there's plenty of that for Pacheco. And Hunt, again, maybe they're just seeing Hunt as, hey, we're okay with what he did last year, and we can fall back on that if these older guys don't pan out.
Yep, I'm with you with all of that. That will be it for today's episode. I want to thank you all for making Locked On Fantasy Football your first listen. We will be back on Monday talking through the top 3 storylines for the Los Angeles Chargers. Don't miss that. I hope you all have a great weekend. We'll talk to you Monday. Bye, y'all.